Welcome back, rock stars, to yet another episode of From the Vault, Rikki Roxx retro action figure review. Today we're going way back to 1999. We're going to be taking a look at something really exciting to me, hopefully for you as well. We're going to be taking a look at the original DC Direct Wonder Woman action figure. Now we're going to do the full A to the Z, Bubba, on this figure here. But real quick, I just want to give us a little bit of a history lesson for those who don't know. If you don't know, you should know, but now you're going to know about DC Direct. What was the deal with this company? What was their action figure line like? Well, back in the late 90s, as we talked about a couple episodes ago, Hasbro had the master DC license at retail to do action figures, etc., and they kind of crapped the bed on that. We did a deep dive on the Hasbro DC Superheroes line a while back, and they had that DC line until roughly 2000 or so. That's when Mattel jumped on it, and they did their Batman line, which was awesome. That begat DC Superheroes from Mattel, which became DC Universe Classics, etc. So that's what was going on in the retail space, but at the same time, there was a division of Warner Brothers and Warner Media that sold DC collectibles directly to the consumer through specialty stores like comic book shops. Statues, dolls, action figures, and so on and so forth. So that's the point of DC Direct. They ran from 1998 until about 2012 under the DC Direct banner, at which point they changed the name to DC Collectibles and carried on until about 2020, at which point they shut down, and has since been revived as a subline of the McFarlane Toys brand, their DC license. So that's pretty interesting. Happy to see, the name out there still, DC Direct, even though it's a completely different thing. It's not the DC Direct I came up with, but in any event, a lot of exciting stuff came out from them over the years. I'm a huge DC Direct collector from almost the very beginning. I'll explain what I mean by almost in a second here. But I do have hundreds of DC Direct action figures. They were notorious for approaching some of the more obscure areas of the DC line. We've talked about how the 90s kind of sucked if you were a DC fan unless you really loved Batman, because you were guaranteed to get a ton of Batman toys, but other stuff was sporadic at best. You weren't always guaranteed to be able to go to the store and buy a Wonder Woman action figure or a Green Lantern or whatever. So DC Direct, if you were a fan of the DC line, they were pretty much the only way you were ever going to get action figures of certain characters that were not part of a cartoon show or not in a movie, for example. So they did the first ever action figures of a ton of characters, like the Alan Scott Green Lantern, Jay Garrick Flash, a lot of the villains like Sinestro, Captain Cold, Mirror Master. DC Direct was the first time a lot of the DC characters were ever reproduced in action figure form. And that was a huge deal to somebody like me, who has over 20,000 comic books in the vault. So it was a bit of a revelation. The Hasbro line at retail, like we talked about, was pretty bad. And so DC Direct, they saw an opening in the market, and they said, why don't we start doing figures in the commercial space? And you had to go to the comic book stores and the specialty shops to find these. You couldn't get them at Toys R Us or Kmart or KP or any of that. But if you knew, you knew. And this figure we're going to look at today, this was the first superhero action figure produced by DC Direct, 1999. They did do a few other Warner Brothers properties as action figures before this. They did Alfred E. Newman, the Black and White Spy from Mad Magazine. They did a couple other Warner Brothers characters, but this was the first DC superhero that was produced by DC Direct. And interesting character to start with, Wonder Woman. Now there were some reasons for this. Again, both Batman and Superman, the rights were a little complicated at that time because of what was going on with Hasbro and Mattel and all of that. Mattel had the master Batman license, so DC Direct, for example, couldn't do a lot of Batman stuff until way later on. Same thing with Superman. So they kind of danced around that by putting out different characters who hadn't been done to death in action figure form. And that is where we are today with this Wonder Woman action figure. Really, really cool. I did not actually have this until a couple of weeks ago, though. I've always kicked myself for it. I used to see it everywhere, at the flea markets, the comic book shops. And I picked it up and put it down so many times. You know, it was always something else I wanted to spend the $20 on that day, and so I just never picked it up and felt foolish. But especially a few years went by and they did other Wonder Woman figures. DC Direct ended up doing about 20 to 30 different Wonder Woman figures that I'm aware of, all various degrees of awesome. This one was the first. The later ones were better, so I tended to pick up the newer, quote, better ones, and then so this one just sort of got pushed back and off my radar. And then a couple weeks ago, I was just clicking around and I realized that I never did pick up this specific Wonder Woman figure, and I said, I'm going to fix that mistake. So I only paid about the same as it retailed for back in the day. I paid about $20-25 on eBay. This is not a hard figure to find. It is very easy to get. Pretty much any online, eBay or anything like that, you're going to find it pretty cheap. There was also a variant with some armor. Let's take a look at the back of the package real quick. They show you the other DC Direct figures that were available at that time. As I mentioned, they started off doing some Mad Magazine stuff before they eventually started doing some superheroes. So, I mean, a bit of a weird start to the line when you think about it, but hey, whatever. They got there eventually, and they ended up putting out thousands of amazing DC figures. It all started right here. I really like the packaging here. I like that shot of Wonder Woman. The figure looks really great in that photograph there. And yeah, and give you a little bit of text there, just giving you the rundown. What they used to do back then was each character had its own specific box art, because they didn't so much do lines or waves of action figures back then. The characters that would come out would pretty much be a random assortment. For example, the first 3 DC characters they did were Wonder Woman, Swamp Thing, and Sandman. So not a lot in common there. They were just sort of like doing whatever seemed cool to them at the day. But it was also kind of exciting because you never knew what figures you were going to get. It was all over the place in a very cool way. So in this case, you see here the backdrop art. You get some really nice classical columns, and then very, very fitting to the character. Each character would have something like this, unique and specific to them for the box art. I really love that. I miss that. I wish stuff like that would be done more often. I find a lot of today's packaging, it's a little bit bland and generic. Like, nothing against the McFarlane line and everything, but those black boxes, they're just kind of dull. I miss stuff like this. I wish every character, had something specific to them, just to kind of put it over a little bit more, One of the things that's so cool about the DC brand is that they have so many different characters, and they're all unique to themselves, and they all have things about them that make them special and unique, and I really like when they lean into that as much as possible. It really helps put each individual character over that much more. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back in a minute. We're going to find... All right, there she is, Wonder Woman from DC Direct, 6 inches tall with her battle axe and shield, golden lasso at her hip. She is the first DC superhero action figure released by DC Direct. Obviously not the first ever Wonder Woman action figure. There have been some from Kenner, Superpowers line, Toy Biz, their DC Superheroes line. There was the Total Justice and JLA, all those figures. Hasbro, I think, kind of whiffed on Wonder Woman, but this was the first of many that were to come from DC Direct. And as you can see, sculpting, really, really awesome. Colors look great. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points of articulation, which was above the standard of the day for many retail lines, but it does come with a few drawbacks of its own we will talk about shortly. But overall, as you can see, up to that point, from 1999 standard, I would argue, up to that point, probably the greatest Wonder Woman action figure that had seen release. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about what's good, what's bad, what's in between, but for now, just drink it in, take a good long look at the first ever Wonder Woman action figure released by DC Direct. Gotta love it. Alright, so this is it. Out of the package, we have Wonder Woman, and, on the surface, really awesome figure. I remember even at the time, very striking. This is the first 6-inch Wonder Woman action figure that had ever been made. So right away, that made it stand out. A lot of the retail lines around 98, 99, 2000, they were jumping up to 6-inch scale, which was awesome. They were experimenting with more articulation, but again, DC Direct, at the time, they technically had more articulation than your average retail figure because they had knee and elbow joints, which a lot of the retail lines did not have. You still had a certain degree of pre-posing, as was the style at the time, but not to the degree of like the Total Justice figures, with the really weird crunched up poses. DC Direct would just basically focus on giving you a clean, iconic version of a character as close to their comic book depiction as you could possibly get. Now, this is not based on a specific artist's rendition of Wonder Woman, but if you know the comics, you can see that it is pretty strongly based on the George Perez late 80s, early 90s version, especially the face. Later on, DC Direct would start doing lines specifically based on storylines from the comics, specific artists like Alex Ross, Ed Menez, Michael Turner, so on and so forth. But in the early days, they really would just try to find a sculpt that was sort of in between. So here you get like a cross of, it looks like predominantly George Perez with maybe a little bit of John Byrne. But yeah, that was, you can't go wrong with that. Really awesome likeness, costume completely accurate to how she dressed at the time. Now, her costume's obviously changed a million times since then, but this was a very comic book accurate version of Wonder Woman. I like the hair. That was how she was drawn in the 90s. I like that they did like a dry brush of some blue highlights there to really make the hair sculpt pop. I like some detailing there. It's a way to go. Again, very comic book. The only thing here, this figure is so old that some of the gold paint breastplate has rubbed off. I'm probably going to go back and fix that myself just to make it look better because it's sort of faded out, almost gone in certain spots up there. So that's unfortunate, but easy fix. The gold on the belt and the lasso is still pretty ship shape, so I'm really happy about that. The paint job otherwise is really good. There's not a lot of bleed or, not really that I can see. The detailing on those tiny stars, that always impresses me quite a bit. Really, really good stuff. There's a little bit of white bleed on the boots, but, it's fine. It's fine. The skin tone, a little bit yellowish, but, perfectly within reason for action figures, especially back then. They're always pale to me. I don't like the flesh tone plastic they use for most action figures. It looks too jaundiced, too yellow. When I repaint them, I usually try to give them like a little bit darker, more vibrant flesh tone. But this is pretty good. It's fine. So you got two accessories, the Battle Axe and Star Spangled Shield. Now I will say the shield is awesome. That looks great. No complaints there. The axe confuses me a little bit, just because she's more typically known for having a sword, especially in more recent years. I am sure that I'm just forgetting something, and I'm positive that you can go on Google for 5 seconds, find an example of her with the battle axe, but if I had booked it, I would have given her the sword and shield. What can you do? It's fine, though. It's cool, and if anything, it makes it stand out more uniquely from a lot of the other Wonder Woman action figures. So that's really cool. Again, you were lucky to get any accessories back then when you bought an action figure. This one comes with two, and this would have cost $20 at retail price. So that's pretty awesome. And so yeah, the sculpting is great, the paint is great, the colors are great. What's not so great? Well, the articulation is good and bad. As I said, at the time, 99, 2000, DC Direct was a little bit ahead of the curve when it came to articulation on their action figures, because they did have elbow and knee joints, whereas a lot of the stuff you can get at Toys R Us from Mattel and Kenner and Hasbro, they didn't bother with that for some reason, I guess, to save costs. As time went on, though, by the mid-2000s, around 2007, 8, most retail lines had advanced well beyond the kind of articulation DC Direct would offer, and then you started to hear the jokes about DC Direct action figures being posable statues. It's harsh, but it's true. There's a lot of DC Direct figures where they'll give you points, but they don't have a lot of mobility. Also, some of the joints can be stiff or brittle, make you not want to move them too much, and some of them were just notorious for not being worth much at all. Now here you technically have 9 points. Pretty good for 1999. Problem is, for example, there's a lot of little problems. You do have some head movement, a little bit more than you might expect, but it is limited by the hair. So you're only going to be able to turn her head so much, but I will say for the standards of 1999, that's beyond acceptable. So pretty good there. The arms, you just have the up and down. They don't go side to side like later figures would. The right arm, you got a fully articulated elbow. That's cool. Left arm, though, here you got a problem. Just pop the shield. Shield is really cool. It just pops right on and off. Very satisfying click. So that's neat. So her elbow, she has a joint there, but you have almost no actual movement there because it's only built to hold the shield. It's not bent. It's not built for her arm to be straight. So it's just, you have two options here, bent or really bent. You might as well not even have a hinge joint there at all. I don't know what possessed them to do that, considering the right arm is built to fully articulate. And trust me, you do not want to force these things. DC Direct action figures, unfortunately, are very prone to break at the elbows and knees. So you can see here by how it's sculpted, it's not meant to be straight. It's a permanently bent arm. So that is a choice. I don't know why they did that, but it is what it is. You got the clips. You can see one is a little bit wider to accommodate the forearm than the wrist, so you just make sure it's facing the right way. Pops right on like that. Really good. Axe also. Oh my gosh, wait, I misspoke. Okay, we have more articulation. We have wrist swivel. Okay, cool. All right, so that brings us up to 11. Wow, I didn't notice that when I took it out of package. Neat. Very cool. That you almost never got back then. Wow. Wow, that's neat. All right. Okay, so it doesn't redeem the lack of elbow function, but the fact that you can move the hands, twist the hands, is pretty cool. You didn't see that every day back then. So yeah, all right. Not too shabby there. I'm impressed. And I like that it's hidden by the wrist cuffs. So that's how I missed it. I didn't know she could do that. Very cool. All right, so 11 points of articulation. Good job, DC Direct. You see I have her standing on a base here, peg base. A figure, like many DC Directs, they don't like to stand. They really don't. Some are better than others. This one is a little finicky, but you got something like this that'll fix the problem pretty well. With the weapons, she's a little top heavy, but even beyond that, it's just awkward. You do have range of motion with the legs. It's on that kind of a swivel, but because of that, you're limited in how you can position the legs. The left one is very stiff, and I don't want to force it. So again, this is a 25-year-old figure fresh out of the package, never touched the air. I am going to have to put her in some hot water for a bit before I even attempt to do certain motions because the joints are just too stiff. The knees I can't get to move. Like, they're there, but right now I'm not going to try to force it because, again, you never know with these things. That's the biggest problem with DC Direct is that Some of them will just explode at the elbows or knees if you lean on them too hard. So I'm not going to right now. But again, they're there. So you technically have 11 points of articulation, one hole in the foot for a base peg, which you're going to need if you want to put her up on display, which is pretty much all you can do with a lot of these figures. I mean, you can play with them, yes, but these were specifically marketed for collectors, not so much for kids. A lot of DC Directs would just be too fragile to give to a child, but they make great shelf sitters. They look great posed on display, and this one's no different. So all in all, I gotta say, I am more happy than not with the figure. I'll be happier after I give her a good hot bath and get those joints loosened up a little bit. Hopefully they won't snap on me. I'm pretty sure they won't. The rest of her seems pretty sturdy. Again, they did make other better Wonder Woman figures later on. DC Direct, they made ones with much more articulation. They made ones that came with better accessories. They made ones that were based more closely on specific artists' renderings. There's a few from Alex Ross, Ed Benez, Ed McGuinness, and many, many more. But this one, pretty close to the old George Perez style of their 80s comic book. Really happy with that. So all in all, I would say, I mean, it's a great figure to have. If you're a collector and a historian, I would say definitely pick it up. It's only about $20-25 at most online stores where you'll find it. It's not perfect by any means, but it's a great piece of history. The first 6-inch Wonder Woman action figure. And they really did a great job. By the standards of the day, it was fantastic. By the standards of today, it's quaint, but still really, really good. I mean, it's Wonder Woman. You gotta love it, man. They did do a variant that came out the next year with armor and a spear. I don't have that one, but I'm probably gonna pick that one up. This definitely is not gonna be the last time we talk about DC Direct or Wonder Woman on the show, because I have a bunch more of her, all great, that we're gonna be looking at. But yeah, this is where it started. Gotta love it, man. Gotta love it. So we're gonna wrap it up in just a second, but that's about all there is to say. You got what you paid for back then. Some things could be better. Some things got better later on, but for the first DC Direct Wonder Woman, first superhero figure, for the standards of the time, this would have been an A+, definitely. For now, I would say, I'd still give it a B+, just because things have evolved since then, but it's a great figure to have. I would definitely recommend picking it up. You're going to find it cheap, and it's going to look great on your shelf, and it scales well with just about everything. So if you find it, pick it up. That's my recommendation. We're going to wrap it up in just a second. Well, there's not much left to say. That about says it all for the first ever DC Direct Wonder Woman action figure, and the first time I've talked about DC Direct on the channel. Definitely won't be the last time. That, I promise you. We got more coming at you sooner than you think. As I said, I've got a couple hundred different DC Direct action figures in the vault, and I'm picking up more of them all the time. If it's DC, I'm into it. You know that for a fact. So this has been an experience. This has been Wonder Woman DC Direct on From the Vault, Rikki Roxx Retro Action Figure Review. We're going to be coming at you real soon with some more DC Direct goodness. Stick around, like, share, subscribe. You know how to do the deal. We're going to catch you real soon. And if you can't be good, be bad, baby. We'll see you next time.